Welcome, people, to the final frontier. This is the end. Unit 9, the last unit of the AP course curriculum. And we're talking about globalization, modern times. This is our life, things that we can directly relate to and empathize with. And today we're going to specifically focus on Unit 9, topic 9.1, advances in technology and exchange after 1900. Let's take a look. So what's our objective today? We're going to examine new technologies of the 20th century while also identifying continuities and changes associated with those new technologies. So the skill is going to be identify and explain historical developments and make connections between historical developments using the challenge of change and continuity, and by popular demand, looking at graphs and charts. All right, so I know that was one of the major questions I received for a number of weeks from many of you students is, can we look at graphs and charts together and perform analysis and try to interpret graphs and charts? It's very difficult, and we're going to use this activity to review. So, explain how the development of new technologies changed from the world from 1900 to the present. Whenever you see that phrase changed, they're looking for continuities and changes. What changed, what stayed the same across the time period? Let's zoom into more focused historical developments. First off, the thematic focus is technology and innovation, obviously, focusing on technology. The historical developments pertain to new modes of communication, right? Radio, cellular communication, the internet, as well as transportation, right? Air travel, shipping, really reduced the problem of geographic distance. We're talking about energy technologies, the use of petroleum, nuclear power, renewable energy, right? It raised productivity and increased production of material goods. More effective forms of birth control. This was huge. It gave women greater control over fertility, transformed reproductive practices, contributed to declining rates of fertility in much of the world. The Green Revolution. This is essential. You have to understand what was the Green Revolution and the positive and negative impact. And the commercial agriculture, it increased productivity substantially and sustained over time the Earth's growing population as it spread. Chemically and genetically modified forms of food, agriculture, right? Also, which we are directly experiencing in our lives today, medical innovations, including vaccines and antibodies. Boy, can we empathize with that. And if you're watching this video 4 years from now, you can remember, okay? It increased the ability of humans to survive and live longer lives. Thank goodness for technology. Take a look at this. The biggest change of the 20th century, world population. Let's look at roughly 1950, 2.5 billion. Now look at the chart. Change over time. Look at the end. Let's look at about the year 2000, 6 billion people, a little bit above 6 billion people. So at the beginning of the period, and 1950 is the middle of the period, right? So when you look at something like this, you really want to focus on the end to see like what changed. Well, it was roughly a little bit over 6 billion people by the year 2000. And look what they've been predicting further in the future, what you can mention in complexity. By the year 2050, almost 10 billion people. So you can see the change, all right? So major technological changes during the 20th century. So researchers made rapid advances in science to spread throughout the world, assisted by the development of new technology. So we talked about this already. The communication, transportation, the Green Revolution, vaccines and antibodies, and renewable energy. All right, petroleum, nuclear power were some of the first. Some of the other big changes, right? The impact of humans on the natural world. Right? One of your themes, interaction with the environment. The impacts are all generated by humans and they last for generations over time. Some of these include species extinction, increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, depletion of groundwater reserves, the enlargement of deserts, the dead zones in oceans, transformation of the landscapes and wetlands that shrink urban centers. Look, Japan right now is talking about dumping thousands of tons of toxic waste from the Fukushima incident, from the earthquake, into the Pacific Ocean. Now think to how that would impact if natural habitats and the animals that live in the organisms mix through that toxic waste and spread around planet Earth. What long-term impact would that have on our lives if we were to eat or consume anything out of the sea? The Green Revolution, it spread technologies that already existed before, but had not yet been widely used outside industrialized nations. It increased the accessibility of these technologies, like modern irrigation projects, pesticides, synthetic nitrogen fertilizer to grow more food faster, bigger, improved crop varieties, okay? It was a series of research, the Green Revolution, and technology implementation that led to increased agricultural production around the world. Right between the 1940s to the late 1970s, and it peaked like 1955, 1965, absolute agricultural explosion. Okay, Norman Borlaug, father of the Green Revolution, okay? It involved the development of high-yielding varieties of cereal grains, the expansion of irrigation infrastructure, modernization of management techniques, distribution of that hybrid seed, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides to farmers. If you walk into ShopRite or A&P and you look at a strawberry the size of your fist and you think, how does this naturally grow on a farm? It doesn't. All right. So we realized how to genetically alter food, and there's also negative implications based off that as well. All right. Also, for the increased global food production, we're talking about chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. Does your parent or guardian wash the fruit when they come home, or rinse it in some kind of a pesticide killing chemical, right? Advanced irrigation and land management we talked about already allows for crops to grow in previously unlikely areas like deserts, right? Seed hybridization, genetically modified GMOs. We know all about that, or at least you should, right? Drought resistant, disease resistant, food that can grow virtually anywhere. So now look at this chart. Wheat yields. Remember, that was one of the most significant aspects of the Green Revolution. That's what you need to know, okay? Wheat yields in developing countries. We're talking about second and third world countries from 1950 to 2004, where it was very, very difficult to grow wheat. Look at the wheat yields, the amount grown. Okay, it's almost exponential. You can see the second half of the whole time period. What a huge change. The criticism of the Green Revolution, well, the negative impact, right? There's always a negative side to the story. Some say the Green Revolution is unsustainable over time. It caused overpopulation, which cannot be sustained with current resources. It caused poor diet from simply producing cereal grains. Look at the problem in America, right? With nutrition and obesity. Pesticides used during the Green Revolution poisoned local water sources, killed fish and wildlife, and has a negative impact on human health, destroyed biodiversity, caused some small rural farms to go bankrupt, right? All right. Part 2, historical developments, energy technologies we're focusing on here, including the use of petroleum and nuclear power. They raise productivity and increase the production of material goods. So now look at this here, million barrels per day, in the millions, U.S. petroleum consumption from 1949 to 2014. What changed from the middle of the time period to the end? And you can see an increase in the U.S. petroleum consumption, right? And then when they give you, in the middle of the chart, you can see historical developments, the OPEC oil embargo, Iranian Revolution, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, the financial crisis. If you see a chart like this, that prompted you to understand how the impact of those historical developments changed what's happening over time, right? So then that might be one of the short answers that you get. The world consumption of crude petroleum. You look at a pie chart like this, and you can see the United States, Northeast Asia, Western Europe, and the Middle East lead the world. And they would ask you for the historical implications of that. Right? And you can talk about industry. You can talk about developing industry. You can talk about strength of economy, right? Take a look at this one, nuclear power use. So now one of these new resources, right? And you can see by looking at this chart, Western and Central Europe, North America, Asia, over time, it's for the most part shown an increase, right? And then here's the major players. And you can associate historical developments as to why, how, and why. Whenever the AP provides you with a chart like this, or a graph, or an infographic, you need to connect this to the how and why. Why are those particular countries on this graph, right? All right. Part 3, historical development, more effective forms of medical technology, specifically birth control, gave women greater control over fertility, transformed reproductive practices, and contributed to declining rates of fertility in much of the world. Now, you know, when it comes to medical technology, specifically for birth control, there are cultural implications, right? Depending on your culture, your traditions, your religion, right, are either open or closed to these ideas. And that definitely has an impact on fertility rates per country, per culture. Look at this, world population by level of fertility over time. 1950 to 2100, they even push forward all the way to the year 2100. So you take a look at this and it might be a little confusing. So on the left-hand side, the x-axis, you have 1950 moving down all the way to the year 2100. On the right-hand side, the number of children per woman, right? And now you see the countries. And what you notice is in the top left, you see many second and third world countries. And in the bottom right, you see many developing or first world countries with strong economies, innovation and technology, education, right? Some, you can even argue similar culture, though that's a little more difficult to do. But you can see the more industrialized the nation is, it seems like that coincides with education, medical technology, accessibility to that medical technology. And you can see the lower the fertility rates in the bottom right. The more industrialized, stronger the economy, the lower the fertility rates. And you go on the top left, you can say less industrialized, weaker economy, stronger fertility rates, right? So you need to make these historical connections. Vaccines and antibodies, they increase the ability of humans to survive, right? They contribute to decrease in global death rate, right? Medical innovations, antibiotics. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. This was one of the most impactful medical discoveries in history, okay? Polio vaccine, 1952. It eradicated polio, and it used the term eradicated polio for most countries around the world. And now when you take a look at this, look at the flat line, the drop in polio. 1952, look at the polio spike right there. And then once the vaccine hits, you see the red line, it's almost a dramatic, it's flatlines completely. A vaccine that just eradicates that particular death from polio. All right, you can see that over time. Look at that change over time from 1950 to, say, the year 2000. You can see dramatic changes in all of these. Take a look at this one in yellow, antibodies, antibiotics and vaccines that are introduced around the year 1925 to 1930. And then right next to that, high yield grains developed. Look, 1950, right before 1950, you can see the Green Revolution plus accessibility to medical technology. And those two lines, it's just almost a skyrocket in population growth over the last 500 years. Once you hit the antibiotics and vaccines and the high yield grains developed, look how the population in these major countries skyrockets, right? And you can see that each graph or chart tells a story that's connected to it or associated with historical developments. And those are the connections you need to make. Here we go, multiple choice practice using charts and graphs. So when you make your choice, you're not typing it or writing it anywhere. You make the choice in your head, all right? And now here's the point where we can reason and talk this out. So chart 1. Everybody should be where I am, where you're following along with me. Chart 1 is world population from 1800 to the year 2000. In the x-axis, we have millions of people. So 100, that would be 1 billion, right? So in the year 1800. All right. Now, over time, so year 1800, let's say the time period is 1900 to the present. So what has happened from 1.5 billion to a little over 6 billion? So we can see, is that something that stayed the same or something that changed? Obviously, it's something that changed, right? So now let's look. Which of the following contributed most, and that's the focus, contributed most to the demographic changes shown on the graph above? The answer is C, diffusion of green revolution technology. So the green, out of all of these answers, the eradication of disease, the decreasing level of civilian casualties, increasing fertility rates, C has the most, contributed most, the most significant impact, okay? So you can say increasing fertility rates, for most, infertility rates have decreased, and they are still slowly decreasing, okay? The eradication of epidemic diseases in South Asia is too specific, and the decreasing level of civilian casualties during military conflicts that never affected to a large extent, world population growth. All right, so C would be the answer here. Now, raise your digital hand if you are right. Anybody have any questions about that one? Okay, put your digital hands down. Let's do another one. On a global scale, which of the following directly prevented problems, such as those alluded to in the map, problems alluded to in the map and the graph, from leading to population decline? Which directly prevented problems leading to population decline? So the option's correct, and let's see how the AP reasons this. With the introduction of new crop varieties, new chemical fertilizers, and other green revolution technologies, staple grain yields per acre quickly quadrupled or quintupled in such heavily populated countries as India, Pakistan, and Mexico. And these techniques were widely adopted elsewhere, like here, allowing increased food production without the expansion of land devoted to agriculture. So if you go back to slide 27 or 28, where you can see the little map on the right. So now agriculture explodes in Turkey, it explodes in Syria, you know, right in the middle of Iraq. They have a dam there. That means they can grow more food there. Now this food is more accessible to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey because it's right there. It does not have to be transported there, which dramatically lowers prices, which makes it more accessible to people who have next to nothing, right? And that's how you can make those historical connections, align the logical reasoning. Let's go to 30. Slide 30. The number of nuclear bombs or warheads by nation, 1945 to 2000. All right. In 1945, it was the U.S. 2. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and those were kind of atomic, right? Part of the beginning of this nuclear age. And then by 1950, 299 in the U.S., and the Soviet Union had 5. And then you can see what happens as you go down on the left over time. Okay? So let's take a look. 31, everybody. The primary technology shown in the table contributed most directly to advances in which of the following areas? Internet and cellular, energy, medical vaccines, genetically modified agriculture. Obviously, energy production, right? Nuclear energy, power plants. And then you can talk about a few of them: Chernobyl, Fukushima, what was it, 3 Mile fire? I forgot the name of it. That that exploded, right? And then you get the negative impact from that. Let's take a look at 33. Everyone to slide 33. This is chart 4. This one's not easy. Birth and death rates in Sweden and Mexico from 1900 to 2000. Then they give you historical developments in between on this chart. And the Mexico birth and death rate are the thinner dots in the thinner line, and the Swedish birth and death rate are the thicker dots and the thicker black line. The 2 on the bottom are Sweden, the 2 on the top are Mexico. What is going on here? Based on the trends shown in the graph, which of the following best describes the populations of Sweden and Mexico at the end of the 20th century? Sweden's population was stable, while Mexico's population was still growing. So if you go back to slide 33 and you're like, how in the world did that happen? Because when you look at Mexico's birth rate and the dots and the death rate, you see Mexico's birth rate is slowly declining over time. A lot of people make that mistake. So you see like the downward trend and you're like, well, it's getting worse. But what actually you need to look at from the beginning to the end, and you see that it's still well above the death rate, which actually means that it's still growing. Okay? Evaluate. All right, I know what I'm doing here. So I'm evaluating the values of these objects in one way or another. The development of new technologies is a historical development. How did that change? It's a change in continuity essay from 1900 to the present. Let's go. I was right. Evaluate. Look at the details in order to group by value. The development of new technologies, historical development, changed. Change of continuity essay, and the world from 1900 to present, where and when. Everyone slide 38. World population. World population 1800 to 2000. They want me to do 1900 to the present. It dramatically increased. 1900, 1.5 billion. The year 2000, we're at 6 billion. That's change. All right. Document 2. Everyone to slide 39. Follow me. What is this? The percent of U.S. households. And look at this: telephone, radio, electricity, refrigerator, stove, clothes washer, dishwasher, color TV. All right. This is modern technology, and it seems like everything is trending upward. This is in the United States of America, and it seems like, what is the message here? This is an increased accessibility to modern technology. This is the change in the United States from 1900 to 2000. What changed? It increased accessibility to modern technology. See that right there? It's like almost everybody has a stove, a color TV, refrigerator, electricity. It's all up there on that line, right? Cell phone and internet are lagging behind, but a lot of people have them, right? Everyone, slide 40. What is going on here? There's some crazy line. It looks like somebody's pulse. It says degrees Celsius, average global temperature. Ooh, 1880 to 2011. All right, 13.7 degrees Celsius in 1880. So 1900, it was about 13.9. And oh my goodness, 14.6, say, by the year 2000. The average global temperature increased. Why would they say this? So there's a change in global temperature that's definitely connected to the use of technology and the burning of fossil fuels, right? Change that global temperature. So now I'm going to come over here, slide 41. Here's another one, global vaccination coverage. All right, 1980 to 2019. So they're showing me the end. So what has happened by that time, global, look at, wow, so many, almost half of planet Earth has accessibility to these vaccines. That's increased accessibility to the vaccine usage, right, over time. So we knew in the beginning of the period, no one had it. The vaccines didn't exist. By the end, it's like almost half of planet Earth can get them now, all right? So that's a huge change. Finally, look at the last one. Please stay with me. Global energy consumption by source from 1800 to 2020. Okay, there's no chart here. So from 1800 to 2020, what is the most used global energy source? Crude oil and coal. Those are fossil fuels. So that over time, fossil fuels remains the most used form of energy. This is a continuity. This is what stayed the same over the entire period. The use of fossil fuels was the #1 use of energy. So now go to slide 43. I'm sorry. So now hold on a minute. Hold on. Don't move. I have one more for you. The development of new technologies furnished dramatic changes in the world from 1900 to the present. The reason for this is because here's how you do change. At the beginning of the time period, the global population was 1 billion, and modern technology and energy consumption were in its infancy and largely inaccessible. By the end of the period, when you show the beginning to the end, that's the change. The population skyrocketed to 8 billion people due to the technological advances in medical vaccinations, and accessibility to modern technological conveniences improved quality of life. How do you do what stayed the same? The continuity. Across the time period, fossil fuels continue to remain as the most used form of energy. What to take away from all this? Last slide. New technologies that impacted societies and economies in the 20th century: communication, radio, internet, cell phones, energy, petroleum, nuclear power, reusable energy, green revolution, and pesticides and hybrid crops and medicine, vaccines, antibodies, and birth control. What stayed the same? One of the major components was that energy form. Over the time period, the largest global source of energy, coal and oil, fossil fuels, remain the same. I really, really hope this helps.